I jolted awake, my heart hammering against my ribs, sweat soaking the silk sheets of my oversized bed. The nightmare clung to me like damp fog, the same one that had haunted me for weeks. I was back in that suffocating van, blindfolded, the coarse rope biting into my wrists, the kidnappers' voices a jagged chorus of threats and laughter. Their hands, rough and merciless, tore at my clothes, their words slicing deeper than any blade. I could still feel the cold steel of a gun pressed against my temple, their jeers echoing, "Pastor, where's your God now?" I sat up, gasping, the darkness of my lavish bedroom swallowing me. The glow of the city skyline filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse, a stark reminder of the wealth I'd amassed. My chest tightened as I tried to shake off the dream, but it lingered, as it always did, dragging me back to that night 3 months ago, when my world shattered. I was Pastor Samuel, the revered shepherd of God's Love Ministries, a megachurch with thousands of devoted members. For years, I stood at the pulpit, my voice booming with conviction, urging my congregation to pray about every situation, marriages, finances, health, and, above all, our leaders. Pray for those in authority, I'd say, quoting scripture with a flourish, my tailored suit gleaming under the stage lights. Pray for wisdom, for God to guide them, for our nation to prosper. The congregation would nod, their amens reverberating through the auditorium, their tithes and offerings flooding my coffers. But behind the FADE, I harbored a secret so vile it gnawed at my soul. I didn't want the nation to prosper. I didn't want good leaders. I prayed, covertly, shamefully, for chaos, for corruption, for the economy to crumble. Why? Because hardship drove people to my church. Desperation filled the pews. When jobs vanished, when inflation soared, when hope dwindled, my flock came running, clutching their last penny, believing my prayers could summon miracles. And every offering, every seed sown, funded my sprawling estate, my private jet, my collection of luxury cars. I remembered the first time I admitted this to myself. It was years ago, during a private moment in my study, surrounded by mahogany shelves and imported leather furniture. I'd just finished a sermon on perseverance, urging my members to trust God despite the country's spiraling economy. As I counted the day's offerings, stacked high with crisp notes and bulging envelopes, I felt a twisted satisfaction. The worse things got, the more they needed me. Good governance, I realized, was my enemy. A thriving economy meant fewer desperate souls, fewer offerings, fewer reasons for them to cling to my promises of divine intervention. I justified it, of course. I told myself I was helping them find faith, giving them hope in a hopeless world. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was a hypocrite, a wolf in a pastor's robe, fattening myself on their suffering. The nightmares started after the kidnapping. I'd been driving home from a late-night service, my convoy of subs gleaming under the streetlights, when the van cut us off. Masked men, armed and ruthless, dragged me from my car. My security team, paid handsomely to protect me, scattered like roaches. I screamed for help, invoked every connection I had, politicians, businessmen, even the corrupt officials I'd secretly supported. But no one came. For 3 days, I was their prisoner, beaten, humiliated, my faith mocked as they stripped me of my dignity. They didn't care about my status, my wealth, my influence. To them, I was just a man, frail and powerless. They released me after a ransom was paid, money siphoned from the church's coffers. Of course, I returned a shadow of myself, my confidence shattered. The congregation rallied around me, praying for my healing, but their devotion only deepened my guilt. I couldn't stand in that pulpit anymore, couldn't face their trusting eyes knowing the lies I'd fed them. A month later, I announced my resignation. I told them I needed time to recover, to seek God's direction. They wept, begged me to stay, but I couldn't. The nightmares wouldn't let me. As I sat in my bedroom now, the city lights mocking my sleeplessness, I replayed my sermons in my mind. I'd preached about praying for leaders, but in my private prayers, I'd whispered for their failure. I'd endorsed corrupt politicians, slipped them donations from church funds, knowing their greed would keep the nation broken. I told myself it was for the greater good, that my ministry thrived because of it. But the truth was uglier. I wanted the power, the wealth, the adulation. I wanted the desperate to keep coming, their offerings sustaining my empire. I thought of Mrs. O'Brien, a widow who gave her last savings to the church, believing my prayers would save her son's failing business. I thought of young Henry, who tithed his school fees, trusting God to provide. I thought of the countless faces, their eyes shining with hope as I promised miracles I knew wouldn't come. My stomach churned. How many lives had I exploited? How many had suffered because of my silent prayers for chaos? Stepping down hadn't erased the guilt. It hadn't stopped the nightmares. Every night, I was back in that van, the kidnappers' voices blending with my own sermons, accusing me, You preached prayer, but you prayed for ruin. I'd wake screaming, my wife stirring beside me, her worried eyes searching mine. I'd lie, say it was just a bad dream, but she knew something deeper tormented me. I tried to make amends. I donated to charities, funded scholarships, even visited the sick, acts I'd once delegated to junior pastors. But the gestures felt hollow, like coins tossed into a bottomless well. The nightmares persisted, each one a reminder of my betrayal. I saw the kidnappers' faces, but now they wore the faces of my congregation, their voices chanting my own words back at me. Pray for your leaders. Pray for change. And then they'd laugh, a cruel, guttural sound, as they tore at my soul. I stood and shuffled to the window, the city sprawling below like a wound that wouldn't heal. I'd built my empire on lies, and though I'd stepped down, the weight of those lies still crushed me. I wanted to confess, to tell my congregation the truth, but fear held me back. What would they say? Would they curse me, stone me, or worse, forgive me? I didn't deserve their forgiveness. The nightmares would continue, I knew. They were my punishment, my own personal hell. Each night, I'd relive the kidnapping, the humiliation, but worse, I'd relive my own hypocrisy. I'd see the faces of those I'd deceived, their prayers unanswered, their hopes shattered, and I'd wake, gasping, knowing I could never outrun the truth. I turned from the window, the darkness of my room swallowing me once more. Somewhere in the distance, a dog howled, and I felt the familiar dread creeping in. Sleep would come again, and with it, the nightmares. They always did.